Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast. Powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. With Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson, bringing you all the chatter that matters.
Well, September is upon us, Curtis.
It is, yes. Yeah, that's
second new plate of the year.
Yeah, it's come around, isn't it?
Yeah. I wonder how many people were picking new cars up this Sunday. From the dealerships. I suspect there'll be some last-minute activity on taxing vehicles for August.
Yes.
And see what September looks like. It's going to be intriguing when we get to the end of September as to what happened in that month, won't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, us in the industry, we get a bit blasé about the plate change. But I was chatting with a friend just a couple of days ago, and he's picking up his new car on Monday because the dealer is closed on Sunday. And he's really excited. he's really, really excited. And I think, maybe we tend to forget about, just how big a deal it is, buying a brand new car, which I know is something that Stephen Whitton will be picking up on later in the podcast, because his Menable Moment is very much focused around those joyous moments in the showroom, as he describes it, with the September plate change.
Yeah, and you just made an interesting point earlier, because the friend that you said you spoke to can't pick it up on the Sunday because the dealership is closed that day and they have to pick the Monday. And thinking back now, there'll be a lot of dealerships that are actually closed this Sunday because they're now doing this new working and the best for work-life balance. There is a lot of dealerships these days that don't actually open on a Sunday trading. So it'd be interesting to see whether actually do they open to hand over new cars, or is it just kind of, pick it up whenever it's convenient during that week. It's going to be it's going to be intriguing to see that one.
Yeah, I suspect Monday's going to be mega busy for a lot of our listeners.
Yes, everyone's trying to get it in there. So we have got a couple of shout-outs this week, and the first one we must acknowledge Robin Luscombe, a friend of the podcast and well-known across the industry, and he's raised £23,000 for prostate cancer UK, and this is the story actually is ran by Car Dealer magazine, saying that car dealer Robin Luscombe raises £23,000 for prostate cancer as he speaks out on his own battle, saying that legendary car dealer Robin Luscombe opens up on the battle with prostate cancer. Yorkshire-based retailer announced it, encourages other dealers to get checked before it's too late, and especially changed his biking event has raised £23,000. So, I mean, a massive, massive shout out to Robin for that.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know how Robin will feel about being described as being legendary, but he is, isn't he? He's a genuine legend in our industry. Yeah. And so he raised this money. It was through, and he did post a lot on social media around this. It was a special biking event, which he dubbed Lesky's Lead Mine Marathon, which was a trials bike marathon, because he's a big trials bike rider up a rocky stream in Yorkshire. So rather him than me, but amazing success here. And as you say, he's raised £23,000 for Prostate Cancer UK.
Yeah, he is massive into his trial bike. He's Robin. I often see a lot of his videos and updates on his trial bike, and he's been through some challenges through the years, but he still does manage to get back on that bike, and he does love it. So huge shout out, Robin, and well done for that. And hopefully we'll get you back on the podcast again soon, because I think it was yourself and your son Sam that last came on, and it's been a while since we did catch up with you. So hopefully we'll catch up again soon.
So this week we've actually had a busy week so far, Phil, because we spoke to Dylan Setterfield and Derren Martin, both from Cap HPI, earlier in the week, and it was a podcast that we've wanted to do for a long time, because we wanted to talk to both of them about current values and future forecasting. So the stars aligned. We managed to agree a date. We spoke to both of them, and it's actually gone down really, really well. There's been a lot of downloads on that particular episode.
Yeah, no, it was. The feedback has been brilliant. There's a lot of people listening to it. Really enjoyed the conversation between both Derren and Dylan, because they both had things to say on both the current and the future values, and fantastic chat there with both of them. We said we will do it again in the future when the timing's right, but we've got an extract coming up this morning for you. But as always, we would encourage you to, if you've not listened to the full interview, I think it's about 35 minutes long from memory. It's worth heading over to the full interview there with Derren and Dylan, because talk about the current marketplace, what's happened in the month of August. We talk obviously about EV values, and we can't not talk about that, but also a little bit kind of what to expect through Q4 this year into Q1 next year, and a little bit further out from Dylan there, talking about sort of 25, 26 and 2027 of what's happening around that ZEV mandate. So as we said at the time of sharing the podcast, it is not one to be missed. So do have a listen to that if you've not listened to it already.
You're listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors.
Headlines this week come from Car Dealer, The Guardian and AM Online. Starting with, new research finds the proportion of fully electric company cars has actually fallen this year, while petrol and plug-in hybrids have both increased their shares. Meanwhile, hybrids are reportedly enjoying a surge in the used car market. Why now is a great time to buy used EVs, according to a report in The Guardian. Steve Nash prepares to step down as CEO of the Institute of the Motor Industry after leading the industry body for over 10 years. And finally, this week, we'll look at how Vauxhall has become the first car maker in the UK to offer an electric model for the same price as the equivalent petrol version with its forthcoming all-new Frontera.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. If you're a supplier and would like us to profile your business and reach our audience of dealer bosses, managers and decision makers on one of our dedicated supplier specials episodes, get in touch with Curtis and Philip at motortraderadio@yahoo.com.
So as mentioned earlier, we've got the first extracts here from the interview with CAP HPI's Derren Martin and Dylan Setterfield, and talking, as we said before, about the current and future used car market.
There's two things. It's always about supply and demand within the market, obviously. And what we're seeing at the moment is that demand is pretty good. The retailers that we speak to and the retail data that we're tracking show that it's okay. It's either okay or good for retailers. From the sort seems to be sort of two camps there. So the August school holiday period hasn't had too much of a downturn. Still seems to have been steady demand. So the retailers are doing okay. I think a key point is that none of them have overstocked really. They're being a little bit more careful because of stocking fees, interest charges. So when they do sell, they're looking to replenish. So they're not buying in bulk, but they're dipping back in to the wholesale market and looking to buy stock. And the other big side of it is that supply levels are not huge. There's a shortage of cars at that 3 and 4 year old point, because if you cast your mind back 3 or 4 years, we had 2020 of COVID. 4 years ago, 2021 was the semiconductor crisis, where semiconductors and other components of vehicles led to a shortage of new cars. So there's not so many new cars coming through at those key age and mileage points. So you've got dealers that are doing well and need to replenish their stocks. And when they do go and replenish their stocks, there's not a plethora of cars for them to choose from. So they're having to pay sort of top money for them. I also think that because of what happened in quarter four last year, that got prices to a reasonable level. They haven't gone back down to pre-2021 levels, but they're at a level now that are reasonable for the consumer, reasonable for the retailers to buy, and it all just seems very, very stable. They don't need to bid low on cars, and if they want them, they've got to compete for them, which is keeping prices where they are. But also, they don't want to overpay, so prices are maintaining their level really and staying very, very stable. Obviously, there's loads of different models that we value, and some are still quite volatile, but overall it is a stable picture.
And that's what we expected. If you go back 12 months ago, we were telling everybody, well, we expect to get quite a difficult time at the end of 2023, as we're expecting to see quite a lot of volume coming back into the market, but then it would get better. And we always said this year was going to be favourable to normal seasonality. And those things that Derren mentioned, the fact that we're expecting demand to continue to be quite robust, and we already knew we were going to have less supply. If we compare to 2019 levels, we're missing more than 2.7 million cars. So that's going to continue to have an impact as we go forward.
And I'm assuming, Dylan, that the impact of the Olympics, the Euros, and the election that everybody asks you every single time there are these kind of things on, didn't have a significant impact.
No, it never does. There might be individual days when people aren't going into dealerships, and then they go in the next day instead.
I wonder how many times people ask you that question before those events and what the impact
every time. Yeah.
Exactly. So, Derren, just thinking about, you mentioned fuel types before, and obviously we can't have you and Dylan on without talking about the electric vehicle market. But how are EVs in particular now sort of performed over this first half of the year, and particularly through the month of August?
Yeah, so we're now 2 years. Total 2 years in total of monthly drops for EVs. If you go back to September 2022 was when values started to come down. There was obviously a lot of pain felt around that time, and values came down considerably over that period of time. But we have now reached a sort of a more stable time. They still dropped by more than the average. So electric vehicles in August dropped by an average of 1%. Which is equivalent to £240 at that 3-year point. But the rate of decline has certainly slowed. And since that point 2 years ago, we've taken 60% out of battery electric vehicle values. So they've really come down dramatically in that time. And I think that has led to retailers being quite wary about stocking them. But we've certainly been talking recently that it's a great time to stock them, and for the consumer to buy as well. And we are now seeing some models that have sort of maintained their value in a more stable market. So Audi e-tron Sportback, Cupra Born, Jaguar I-Pace, VW ID3, they've all they've not moved for 2 months now in value. So a real stable picture for those. And you've got some that have actually gone up in value. So we put the Q4 e-tron Sportback up by 1%. The Mustang Mach-E has gone up by a couple of percent. MG5 up 3%. Nissan Leaf has gone up, only slightly, but it's gone up. Peugeot E2008 and the Model S, so a bit of an older model there, but that's gone up. So it's a real sort of difficult thing to call the EV world, because you have got some stability. You have got some that are now going back up because they look really good value, but you have got some that have fallen quite dramatically as well. So you need to pick your models very carefully with that. The i4, BMW i4 Grand Coupe dropped by 4%. Fiat 500 electric dropped by 2%. The Taycan continues to feel a bit of pain. That's dropped by 3%. It's over £1,000. And the Model Y, we're starting to see more of those coming back into the market, and that's dropped by over £1,000 or 4%. So you've got quite a difficult market to call, and you can't really discuss EVs in general, as we've been saying for quite a long time now. You have to look at everything in isolation, because some of them look really good value, and sweet spot for retailers seems to be below £20,000, and almost irrespective of age and potentially mileage as well. If the cars are hitting that sort of price point below £20,000, then they look cracking value. So retailers are certainly dipping back in and looking at that sort of price point on EVs. But as I say, some are still continuing to drop.
And you'd be quite surprised by some of those cars now that are appearing at those kind of £20,000 price points. You look at 3-year-old Audi e-trons and Jaguar I-Pace, they're quite expensive cars. And, 3 years with average mileage on, that they're around that £20,000 mark retail, which is, we probably wouldn't have believed that a couple of years ago.
I mean, that's just a snapshot of our full discussion, but a fascinating insight there. And it's great to hear Dylan coming in on the current forecasting or current trends as well, because his speciality is that future forecasting. But you can see where it all sort of blends, and you can't have current trends without future forecasting, and sort of vice versa.
Yeah, and I think without sort of saying too much about the full interview there, it's probably inside people that they must listen to the full interview, but it's very they've got to get that balance right, because you'll find in the interview that you talk about some of the current challenges and changes that don't necessarily influence or impact the long-term residual value, the forecast, that they are current value nuances in the marketplace. And that's where the teams have got to get that balance right, that there are nuances that are happening today that won't necessarily change long-term forecasts, because when you're setting residual values for the fleet leasing sector and the OEMs, they don't want volatility. And we've talked about that loads of times, haven't we, on the podcast around electric vehicles. So do have a listen to that. But moving on, and it aligns a little bit, and sounds like Curtis has done the headlines here. But going over to fleet news. So petrol and hybrid company cars increase market share. And this is that saying that the proportion of fully electric company cars has fallen, whilst petrol and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, or PHEVs, have grabbed market share. And that's new analysis. And that has also come from CAP HPI.
Yeah, so this is looking at the months January to July, and as you say, it's from their insight report. And bearing in mind, we've got ZEV mandate, we've got the accelerated push on new EVs, but this is showing that the uptake within the fleet sector, which is where most of the EVs are being registered, is starting to slow. Certainly in the company car side of the fleet sector. So the figures show that. For instance, the diesel fleet registrations have fallen from a market share of 4.9% to 4% over the first half of the year. So no surprise there. But petrol vehicles, meanwhile, have increased over the same period, rising from 24% to 26% of the fleet market. And we've got plug-in hybrids with the biggest risers, jumping from 16% to 23% of registrations. And Andrew Turner, the senior product specialist at CAP HPI, said, while the decline of diesel registrations has been significant, petrol vehicles still account for a quarter of the market. And I think that's kind of the key to the story. There is still this big fleet demand for petrol vehicles.
Yeah, and some of this will be that your choice of diesels are just not there anymore. I mean, it's they just, if you went into certain manufacturers' showrooms now, you wouldn't even get the option of buying a diesel variant because they've removed it from their lineup. Your choice will be either a full petrol, a mild hybrid petrol, a plug-in hybrid, or an EV. That you just don't have diesel, and those are vehicles that company car drivers have probably had for many years in their life cycle of vehicles, and they'll be walking back into certain showrooms and it's not there. So you just can't get that equivalent model as a diesel variant today. So, and obviously there is still this challenge of this full battery electric vehicle market. I think we've discussed it previously on the podcast where, there's been reports where people have had a full BEV and then their second vehicle, they've gone back to either a petrol or a hybrid.
Yes.
They had issues with the charging infrastructure for doing their business. So yeah, it's but seeing the stats, I mean, it's a telling story, isn't it?
It certainly is, yeah, and it does link very closely with our next story, which is really looking at the used side of this. So going over to AM Online, the headline there is "Hybrid Cars Overtake Petrol in Used Car Market as Consumers Start EV Shift." Now, there is a caveat to this, because the research that was undertaken by Indicator for this, and it was of used cars over the course of July. For hybrids, it does include mild hybrid EVs as well as plug-in hybrid EVs. So Indicator's research says that collectively they made up 1 in 3 of total sales of used cars up to 4 years old. So another caveat there is that vehicle ranged from 1 to 4 years old, but that's still quite a high percentage, isn't it? We're talking about just under a third there.
It is, yeah. And Dean Merritt, who's the head of sales at Autorola UK, said that drivers have increasingly been switching to hybrids, particularly those not yet ready for fully transition to EVs, saying that hybrids, like EVs, are part of the seismic change currently underway in the used car market as consumers embrace the opportunity to move away from the traditional internal combustion engine vehicles. So kind of reiterating what we were just saying there previously of some of the challenges in the new car market around that fleet sector, but actually transition into the used vehicle space as well.
Yeah, and I'd also add to this that awareness of mild hybrids is actually pretty low. And I know this from various conversations I've had where I've used the term mild hybrid, and people think I'm making it up. What's a mild hybrid? So as an alternative to full plug-in electric vehicles, mild hybrids, certainly in the used sector, it's an easier decision to make, because it doesn't involve doing anything, does it?
No, it does give you that option of being able to drive it on EV mode when it's got enough power to do that. At the same time, you've still got your combustion engine to use as well. So no, it is a good alternative for many users.
Next up is this week's Menable Moment with Stephen Whitton taking a timely look at the September plate change.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on Motor Trade Radio, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines from across the media, available on demand, wherever you are, and on your podcast feed. Next up is our latest Menable Moment, looking at mental wealth and well-being awareness and best practice in the automotive sector. With me, Stephen Whitton. Yeah, hi everyone, it's Menable Moments time again. Hope you're well. And I'm delighted that this week's Menable Moments coincides with one of the key events in the automotive calendar. And I am, of course, talking about September the 1st, new registration month. And many of you might be going, yeah, it's easy for you to say, Whitton, because you're not in a showroom anymore dealing with the hundreds of cars we need to get ready and out the door and PDI'd and all that admin and finance payouts and all of that stuff that you have to do for September the 1st. But I just wanted to a bit of a reminder that obviously for your customers, that can be one of the most joyous events. They're only changing their car every 2, maybe 3, or maybe even 4 years. And to pick up a new car on new registration day is genuinely a very joyous event. And I can remember way back when that used to be on August the 1st. And that was the main key registration change month, wasn't it? Way back when. Hands up if you can remember that. And I seem to remember we always did what we could to make it as joyous an event as possible, as per the bloke riding the Harley in the background that you can probably hear right now. Great timing, thanks for that, mate. But so what are you doing this weekend to make your customers have an amazing, joyful experience when they pick up their new cars? Is it flowers? Is it champagne? Is it some kind of brand-related experience? What is it that you do? Is it a gift? Is it something specific to them? And what does the overall experience look like? Because your handovers are probably magical, but how do you manage that when you've got, a whole load of cars going out all on the same day? And do you still do that thing with the 1 minute past midnight thing? We always used to do that years ago. So a few things to think about. So within that, of course, is the never-ending issue or challenge of how do you manage people's mental wealth? Because if you're very task-oriented, and we've talked about this before, then clearly handling all this stuff around a plate change month is actually, fits well within your gift. The joyous bit of the experience might be a bit of a challenge for you. So how do you do all of that? What is it that you're doing? So as a business, how are you supporting your team? How are you looking after your team's mental wealth, given that this is the real up of the industry that clearly is the complete opposite to the downs of the industry that we have as well. So just a few things to think about. I want to also give a massive shout out right now to my friends at Sandycliff because we've now entered into the next stage at their Nottingham Ford store of sharing the mental wealth journey, and that is that we've now started rolling it out to their entire team. And what that's shown is that we clearly have some bits of work to do, but we're also not very far from encouraging and helping people to open up and talk about mental health and the issues that are going on for them. That business has already pioneered something that we've now called honest absences, and that is that if people are struggling, they don't have any qualms at ringing up and saying what's going on for them in their lives, and making sure that their managers are very well aware of what the real reason for them being off sick actually is. And I've mentioned this before once or twice, that old thing of bad back or tummy bug or the flu or COVID or whatever it is, all of those excuses that many of us have used in the past, don't need to do that when you've got a mentally wealthy business. When you've got managers that understand, that empathise, that are compassionate and caring, then that goes down into the team, and the team will perform well, and the loyalty goes up. And when they do need to take some time out, you may just find that they're a little bit more honest about it. So something else to think about there. And so good luck, and sending loads of love for your September the 1st, and hoping that you have a very joyous weekend and that your customers love the experience of picking up their new cars. So we will catch you on the other side. If, as ever, you want any help at all with any aspects of mental wealth across your business, then give us a shout. You know how to get hold of me, stephen.whitton@menable.org. Take care, speak to you soon.
Well, I think Steve has captured the excitement there of the plate change, don't you think, Phil?
Yes, and unfortunately, I very much remember those August the 1st handover,
Yes.
midnight deliveries back in the day. Yeah, so I did a lot of those with some old friends and colleagues from across the sector. There were some good times. I think record was about 75 handovers in one day I did.
Oh, wow.
That took a little bit of organisation.
That is some going, isn't it?
Yeah. I remember having delivery packs either side of my desk piled high and it was a full organised. Yeah. But those were the days, Curtis?
Yeah, definitely. And what was the brand?
That was Fiat. So it was,
That's even more amazing.
Yeah, the old Pandas and Unos and Puntos and T-Paws, you name it. Yeah.
And
I'm only 21, really, to be fair, but yeah.
Yes. And great to have an update there from Steve about Sandycliff and the Nottingham Ford store, because it is something that he's been documenting on social media, and it's a great program, and they've really bought into Menable and sort of raising the whole issue, the whole question of mental well-being across the workforce. So great to have an update there on how that's progressing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's great when you see the work that Steve and the others are putting into well-being and mental health for the sector start to pay off and get involved. So carry on the good work, Stephen. It is fantastic what you're doing. So returning to the headlines and a brilliant story here. And if you've listened to the interview with Derren and Dylan, you've got a little bit of insight into what we might be talking about here. If you haven't, then do have a listen to that interview. But it's a story in the Guardian, and the headline is "Spectacular Bargains. Why now is a great time to buy a used electric car in the UK," saying that the second-hand EV is a possibility for many families as the cost of desirable models, including Kias and Teslas, fall to £15,000. Now, it's quite an in-depth story, this one, because they do take comment from quite a lot of people from across the sector, but it again, very insightful is what they're talking about here.
It is, yeah. And I chose this particular story because it gives a really good insight into what the consumer press are writing about the used EV market. Because you and I, we talk about it on a weekly basis on the podcast. And obviously, whenever we speak to Derren at CAP HBI, it's a big focus of the conversations we're having. So what we're seeing here in this Guardian story is very much sort of making buyers aware that EVs are used EVs are increasingly affordable, and it does tie in actually with what Derren was saying earlier about that 60% drop in used EV values over the last 2 years, which is now, I think what Derren was talking about was that sweet spot below £20,000, which is very much where the Guardian is coming from, because it's identifying some of the vehicles under £20,000 that you can buy and drive away a full battery electric vehicle. And their calculations within the piece say that the average price of a 3 to 5 year old EV in July was £18,964, so not far adrift from that £20,000, compared with £18,000 for petrol models of the same age. So it really is showing that parity, that increasing parity that we're seeing now.
No, and there's a couple of comments in here from Guardian Money saying that they found several Kia e-Neros with the 64 kilowatt battery for sale for around the £14,000 to £15,000, with as few as 37,000 miles on the clock. If you're prepared to buy that model, and even talking about the long-range Tesla Model 3 with about 100,000 miles on, which, if you look at research, that's nothing on the Tesla, that can be bought for less than £15,000, while £20,000 will buy you the more recent model with 55,000 miles on the clock. So, just really highlighting and adding to that message that Derren and Dylan were trying to get across, and the trade are trying to get across continuously, is getting across to the consumers. There's some fantastic used propositions there for those drivers that, whether it's a first or second car, depending where they live, there's some cracking deals out in the marketplace at the minute if you're prepared to look for them.
Yeah, and it is good to see this particular story is in the Guardian, but I'm seeing more and more consumer stories based around this theme, so that the message is trickling out there. So hopefully that we'll start to see that increase in used EV sales, especially as we're seeing more new EVs coming into the used market. So we'll certainly track this story. So moving on, the next headline is from AM Online, and it's IMI announces new executive team as Chief Steve Nash prepares to step down. So during the week, Steve Nash announced on LinkedIn that he will be stepping down as CEO, which is a position he's held for over 10 years, because he started in 2013 But I mean, his association with the IMI goes back over 20 years. So, and we use the term legendary for Robin Luscombe. I mean, Steve Nash is certainly an industry legend. He has been around for a long time. He was a major force at BMW, which is when I think he first started being associated with the IMI. But he's done a great job at the IMI. He's helped raise the profile and got it into possibly more conversations, more industry conversations, and it's pretty much all changed there now.
Yeah, he's saying that the new team will be led, the organisation with 118 employees, and that serves over 110,000 members. And whilst the board, it looks at those initiatives in terms of that permanent leadership over the next year, there's been a few, let's say, those leadership changes. So Kevin Finn, who served as the chair of the IMI since 2020, he's been appointed the newly established role as executive chair to oversee the IMI strategic direction.
And Aslina Bulmer has been promoted to managing director, where she will handle the organisation's overall management and staffing, while Simon Barrell has taken on the role of chief financial officer. So quite a few changes there.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be one that keep an eye on in terms of what they're going to do now. One, with that new structure and that leadership, and three, with that new strategic direction and initiatives that they're looking to roll out. So I'm sure we'll be talking about the IMI again. And the final story of today actually does slightly link back to the some of the previous stories, and this is a great one. It does again show, well, probably shows your age a little bit more on this one than mine.
Thank you.
There's a reason for that. But in car dealer, the Vauxhall becomes first car maker to price an electric model the same as a petrol, saying that the new Frontera will start at 23,495, and that's for a petrol or EV power. And Vauxhall is the first to offer a price parity between EV and ICE for the same vehicle. And order books are open in October for a bold new Crossland replacement. And drivers also want more on-street EV charging. Vauxhall survey finds. So, I mean, again, James Batchelor's done a brilliant little story on this, hasn't he? And what he's sort of highlighted, and some of his points in time that he's managed to indicate.
Yeah, no, but Batch has done a great story on this, and you're absolutely right, Phil, because the Frontera, when I started on company car back in 1993, I think it was one of the first test cars that I had on long-term loan, and it was a 3-door Frontera, which I absolutely loved. Everyone else hated being inside of it because it was a bit on the noisy side. It was a bit on the rough and ready side, but it was just a great, fun car to drive. So the Frontera name, it did disappear from the Vauxhall lineup, but it's been revived for this new car, which is very much a Stellantis car. It shares a lot of its underpinnings with the Citroen C3 Aircross and is effectively the replacement for the Crossland. But I mean, the key to this story is that price parity. When the Frontera does go on sale, as you say, it'll be one price, £23,495, and that buys you the petrol hybrid version or the full electric version. And it's the first time this has been done. Interestingly, within the story, and I'm so glad that Batch included this because, again, it's an old story that I remember, but he says that this announcement comes a decade, and I'm sure a lot of listeners will remember this, a decade after Mitsubishi in the UK made headlines for pricing what was then the new Outlander plug-in hybrid electric vehicle at the same level as the diesel-powered model. And for years, as a result of that, the Outlander PHEV was Britain's best-selling plug-in hybrid because it certainly went down very well with the company car benefiting kind market who saw the tax advantages of it and opted for the plug-in hybrid rather than the diesel.
Yeah, no, it'd be great to see this in the flesh, because the pictures actually look quite nice, don't they? In it, so it should be a nice little thing. And if they say it's got that Stellantis underpinning, and sort of talking there that it's undercutting models such as the Fiat 500e and the MG4. So again, sort of showing now Stellantis moving very quickly and very swiftly into that EV space. But yeah, fantastic initiative from Vauxhall and the Stellantis brand there, moving with that one, because it does really start to think about that price parity between ICE and EV, and how the manufacturers are going to start to look at that. So yeah, I mean, a fantastic lineup of headlines this week, and as Curtis said, a very poignant Menable moment there from Stephen Whitton, and it does make us all feel our age when we all remember the 1st of August registration months. But yeah, and as I say, that snippet from Derren and Dylan, very insightful and thought-provoking of what lies ahead.
But that's all for now. Many thanks for joining us on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. Do check out that full interview that we did with Cap HPI's Dylan and Derren. That'll be in your podcast feed. But until next week, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Thank you for listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. We'll be sharing all the URLs from this week's headlines on Monday morning. To make sure you receive them, just subscribe to the free newsletter on our LinkedIn page. Just search Motor Trade Radio Podcast.